I'm Liam Heverson and I attended the school from 2008 to 2015 and I wondered, is there more than meets the eye to the school? Now history has always been an interest of mine and I've heard rumours of air raid shelters and of secret tunnels and I wanted to investigate what voices of the past still echo within these walls.
Well, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to contribute to the documentary that Liam has been putting together on the school. Westcliff is a school with a very rich history, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to look back and record some of the seminal moments in the history, but also to look at the actual nature of the school itself, where it's come from, how it's grown. Liam has had a particular interest in the buildings as a starting point, as well as the people that, of course, inhabit those buildings over the years.
Westcliff High School for Boys was one of the several local schools set up on the site of Bentall's farm when the business came to an end. Others include St Thomas Moor. The original farmhouse can still be seen as the sixth form block for Westcliff High School for Girls. Westcliff High originally existed as the new commercial school, located in a building named Belfields, adjacent to where the Southend Civic Centre stands today, down Victoria Avenue. This was once home to Henry Brown, founder of Southend's first motorbus service, and was used during the First World War to house German prisoners of war. Then, in 1924, the current school building was constructed. Note the grass over the current South Playground. Graham Stevens attended Westcliff High School for Boys from 1953 to 1959, and we're fortunate enough to have him visit the school today to describe its changes.
Yes, it's now 63 years since I first saw these hallowed portals, and I came as a youngster of 11 years old. And I'm trying to appear at the moment in something like the uniform I might have been wearing at that time. I'm wearing a school blazer, which would have been much lighter with the school badge on it, much lighter colour, a Royal Navy colour, and also a tie, which would have been, for the first years, would have been a house tie, and my house was West, and that would have had green stripes on a black background. Later on, we progressed through the school and we had a different tie. The blazers changed to a darker colour in the fourth year, and that was when also people were wearing the school tie, which is the tie which Liam has there. This is a photo which was taken by my mum on the first day I left home for Westcliff High School, and you'll notice, particularly apart from the rest of the school uniform, I'm wearing a cap which was absolutely compulsory. You should not be seen outside the school without your cap. Of course, because you always had to wear a cap, this led to a certain amount of cap abuse, which meant that peaks were folded, bent, and caps were misshapen.
Here you can see several items of the old Westcliff uniform. This is an old blazer badge and tie. Note this tie belongs to a member of North House, the old houses being North, South, East and West. This cap would have been worn by a school captain. The book here contains an aerial view of the school in 1974, still bearing most of its original features. Note the two grassed quadrangles without the current language classrooms, screens, humanities forums or art rooms. The road which bisects the school site at this time is the main road.
Okay, here we are at the bottom of the bank. When I first came, my mum had a friend who had a son who was here, and his name was Billy Langlois, and he was a bit older, and he also had a friend called Stevens. And when I arrived, they immediately recognised me some way or another. They must have been told to look out for me. And one of the things that was a threatened situation was that new boys got thrown down the bank. They protected me, I must say. Whether it actually happened or not, or would have happened, I don't know. But I was protected by these guys, and it really helped me along in my first few days here. Okay, when I first came here in 1953, it was just after the 1953 big flood on Canvey Island, and of course we had to be evacuated from Canvey, and because of that situation we missed out on some of our education. We didn't take the actual 11+ exam until June, and when I came in September felt rather disadvantaged because the people from the South End area, and particularly from some of the private schools where pupils had come from, they had that extra bit of education before they came to Westcliff. However, they put me in an A form, which I was most surprised at, and eventually I caught up, yeah. I think. Oh, look at these photos here, which says that they're from the 30s, 60s and 70s up to today, and looking around I do recognise some of the teachers who were here at the time I was here in the 1950s. I particularly immediately recognised Claude Webber in this rugby photo here, and always remember Claude because he had a particular peccadillo. He didn't like people playing with round balls, and he used to carry in his back pocket a slipper, which if he saw you playing football with a rugby ball, you were quite likely to get an immediate reaction from Claude with his slipper. Also I can see Mr. Bates, the music master there, and there's Jasper as well. Jasper was a very nice maths master when I first arrived. Unfortunately, he got TB and I think subsequently died from it, and this created quite a situation in the school where our whole school had to be immunised against tuberculosis.
Over almost a century that the school has been running, it has seen many headmasters. Herbert Glenn Williams was headmaster from 1920 to 1944. This is a caricature of Henry Cloak, who was headmaster from 1948 to 1970.
The famous headmaster, quite a good image of him actually, but it does show that, as we always remember him, he very rarely seemed to comb his hair.
Penny shining is a common pastime for pupils, grinding great holes in the red brick facings of the school building. Here is a demonstration. Many huge holes still exist, and some have had to be filled in.
This is quite an insignificant little pockmark really compared with some of those that were done on the frontage of the building, because some of those seem to have half a brick missing.
David Norman was an old Westcliffian of the school and is now president of the Old Westcliffian Association.
There was one tradition in my time in the school which I think thankfully, now speaking as a governor, no longer exists. And that was that there would usually be some major end of term prank by people who were leaving the school. This included such things as putting the school secretary's moped on the roof, or on one notorious occasion, picking up a boat which belonged to one of the teachers and bringing it up from Chalkwell, where it was moored, and sticking it in the school swimming pool, which was down by Manchester Drive. This was a cause of much shock and amusement, but was not particularly popular with the owner of the boat, as you can imagine, to see it, having left it on its mooring, then to see it floating in the school swimming pool. I think that there was a fair degree of retribution for that, and it would seem that the habit of having these big end-of-term pranks has now long disappeared.
These pictures show the school where the whole school was evacuated to during the Second World War. We when we were at school, knew the school had been evacuated. This is new information to me. I didn't know they went to Belper in Derbyshire, but it's all here and shows in the photos. What we do know, I do know, is that when we came, which was 8 years after the end of the Second World War, even in the classrooms, there were marks of where dartboards had been onto the blackboards, because the troops, this was used for troops as a billet during the, well, pre the 1944 invasion. Actually, that's when a lot of troops were billeted here, because Essex and the Thames estuary were an important departure for all the D-Day landings.
During the war, several underground classroom air raid shelters were constructed under the field, connected by an underground tunnel, and in these old photographs you can see the entrances.
I'm proud of the honour. We have decided to accept you because...
Mr Maughan has taught at Westcliff High School for Boys for over 40 years, and I caught up with him on the field to see what he has to say about the air raid shelters. So we've been looking into the rumours about the air raid shelters.
More than rumours?
That would have been at the school, yeah. And as we found recently some photographs with what appears to be a sandbagged entrance, sort of here on the field. So can you tell us about what you remember could possibly have been the remains of that?
I must at this point say I wasn't here in 1940, of course. Yeah, for years and years it was said there were some shelters here, and I suppose, bearing in mind this was obviously quite a dangerous area in 1940 with the Blitz and all the rest of it, and Southend or Watford runway being there with the RAF. Yes, the shelters, years and years ago there used to be, back in the old days, 5 demountable classrooms over there where the car park is today, coming almost a third of the way down the playground here. And when Mr Baker, the previous head, arrived in the 1990s, they all went, but they were reusable, and a huge crane turned up one day to shift them, and it was doing its business. All of a sudden it sort of keeled over, and one of the legs had sunk right into the ground. And you could see, we didn't get too close, but there was obviously an aperture down there, which seemed to be the tunnels about which people spoke. But I'm afraid at the time nobody took it seriously, and obviously as you can see they simply tarmacked over the whole thing. But for a long time there has been talk of such tunnels being there. Also, until the 1990s, this was a grass area. This wasn't a tarmacked area either. Whether that would affect it, I don't know.
Perhaps there's still traces underneath.
I think you need what Tony Robinson has on Time Team, isn't it? All the GeoSat, whatever it's called.
We'll have to invest. This old school prospectus gives us an insight into what the people of England thought about the enemy during the Second World War. A pupil has graffitied pictures of an imagined German murder bomber and German murder plane, which reminds us of what growing up must have been like with the Nazi threat looming over Britain. Next to the school hall stands a memorial dedicated to the old boys that gave their lives in the Second World War.
Okay, we're standing in front of the school now, and where we're standing, just this road would exist within the campus, was originally, when we came, was a little lane, a little country lane in fact, which I believe was Eastwood Lane. And the science block, which is there now and was built when we were here, which is, it's obviously been recovered, that was on the edge of the playing fields, which were known as Benthalls, which were shared by both the schools, by the girls' school and by the boys' school. And along this side, just a little further down, probably where that building is over there, when there was when I recall, there was a very old building, a very old thatched cottage. Probably went back to the 18th century, and when we were here, it caught fire and was destroyed. And on either side of that cottage, there were trees, which sort of shielded the Benthalls area.
Presumably the tech block there was built on the site of it.
It's possible, But all this has been enclosed, the whole of this has been enclosed within the campus of the, well, what is now the combined girls and boys high school.
Did you know that originally the school didn't even have corridors? The tiles that remain today would have been part of the outdoor pathway at the edges of the quadrangles, covered only by a veranda. You would have reached the warmth of the indoors only when you got into your classrooms, so lining up for lessons can't have been pleasant. The east and west quadrangles of the main building were originally lawn areas. The east one here has been paved, with the addition of the art block right and Humanities Forum left, whilst the west one has had the main hall's screens area and the language classrooms added to it. The 1920s hall's design appears to be a late form of Art Nouveau, which would have developed into Art Deco during the 30s. Elements of both can be seen. The hall has remained relatively intact, except for the balcony and stairs, which are a relatively new addition to the building. The wooden stair banister has been designed to emulate the more traditional appearance shared by the rest of the main building. This old photograph of the school hall features hanging lights, which are now long gone.
I believe we're at the door of the first classroom I ever entered, and this was my form classroom in 1953. And by a strange coincidence, it is also a language room now, and our first form master was a lovely old boy called Tud Davis, who taught French, and he must have been well close to retirement. His nickname was Tud, so we presume that was his initials, and I have very good memories of my first few weeks here. It was a very easy, and I was eased into this class very easily, thanks to his tutorship.
The classrooms remain relatively similar to how they once would have been, but they would have had sliding blackboards and used single wooden desks with holes for ink pots. Many of these are still used as desks for exams today. The radiators may seem insignificant, but they are actually original and show Art Deco features around their edges.
This is where the office always was, and it's still here, and there was a little square cubby hole just there, and Miss Williams was always standing behind there, and if you were late, that's where you came and registered with Miss Williams.
The headmaster's office has always stood in the same spot, where there is now an extension with 3 large windows seen here. But there's once a balcony here, with 3 Doric design pillars on it, similar to the neo-Greek design of the main entrance. However, we're not certain if the balcony was ever used, so it could have just been part of the school's original design, with an over-romanticised view of the headmaster watching over the playgrounds. This architectural plan of the school shows the fascinating changes that have occurred to its structure, layout and usage over the years since its opening. The basement, described as the lower ground floor, has since undergone a complete transformation. The eastern section was once used for metal and woodwork, but is now used for reprographics, the uniform shop and computer rooms. The western section was used for the school's sporting life, housing a games store and changing room, where the sixth form centre now lies. Graham told us how the changing room held a large communal bath which pupils would use after getting muddy in rugby. It made for rather an unpleasant experience. Moving on to the main floor, the aforementioned conversion of verandas into main corridors is probably the most significant change that the building has seen, although the addition of the upstairs level and conversion of the science rooms, laboratories and cloakrooms is still fairly interesting. The toilets have stayed in the same place, but the Westcliff Theatre was once a dining hall before catering was relocated to a demountable, once on the site of the Southern Bike Sheds, recently installed. The library was at one time the gymnasium, seen here recognisable only by the windows. This gym was accompanied by the cricket pavilion on the site of the current gym and changing rooms.
There used to be the cricket pavilion there, there was like a small pavilion. Yeah. And then they built a new gym.
The Jim Harrison Sports Hall was a very recent addition to this building. In 2008, the new Maths and Music block was built on the site of a high-quality red tennis court. The playground here was developed in 2013 to vitalise it from what was once a kind of wasteland area. It stood here for quite some time in this way, and it is thought that before, the main road spanning through the site of the school used to run onto the site of the playground. The 2003 Jim Harrison Sports Hall was built to accompany the gym. You can see how the neo-Victorian facing has been emulated here, copying the design of the main building. Graham and I are standing on the site of the old canteen shortly after it was cleared from undergrowth. This demountable canteen would have succeeded the one where the Westcliff Theatre is today.
It's big enough to be a canteen. Yeah, but it did have an air of not complete permanency. Yeah.
And that, as you can see the old bits of probably building materials that we used.
Bits of old school pottery, school plates.
Even when you look in the most unsuspecting places, glimpses to Westcliff High School for Boys past can be found. For instance, the roof tiles are still the original slates and also feature these fancy 1920s decorations or this electrical switch. Even the original steps survive going down to the field, which can be seen in many an old photograph of the school. The bricks show some fascinating graffiti dating as far back as 1949, seen here. Even in the bushes, Graham suggests, lies the site of the old country lane, which was the old Eastwood Boulevard, now the much larger road adjacent. Only a few feet away lies this old road sign, possibly 1970s, and it would have otherwise passed unnoticed. Merging the school's original 1920s design with 21st century developments, the school's facilities continue to develop, such as the new sixth form block. It began construction in 2014 and was completed the following year, around the time of the science block's refurbishment. It could be a surprise to suggest the rock star and renowned guitarist Wilko Johnson has been one of the most successful individuals to have studied at Westcliff High School for Boys, from the 1970s Canvey Island band Dr. Feelgood. Wilko saw a recent rise in popularity after releasing an album with The Who's Roger Daltrey and after having been successfully treated of supposedly terminal cancer, which he was diagnosed with in 2012.
All the cars start going backwards and the traffic light changed to blue. I'm walking 20 yards behind her 'cause I'm frightened of the damage she do.
Another musician to have passed through the school was Gary Brooker, frontman of the 60s band Procol Harum, who went on to tour with the Beatles' Ringo Starr.
Maybe the mirror.
On the other end of the musical spectrum, James O'Donnell was an old Westcliffian who served as organist and master of choristers at Westminster Abbey since 2000.
I'm asking too much. Perhaps we ought to meet each other halfway, and so they did. And they lived happily ever after.
David Nixon was a popular magician and television presenter from the years after the war up to the 70s. He hosted many of his own television shows, such as Tonight with David Nixon, as well as featuring on many popular comedy programmes, such as Candid Camera. He was also supported by Basil Brush, which sparked its explosion into popularity, resulting in the Basil Brush Show starting in 1968. An even quirkier claim to fame from Westcliff High School for Boys could be Geoffrey Crawley. He served as editor-in-chief for the British Journal of Photography and debunked the infamous Cottingley Fairies as a paper cutout hoax.
One of the major activities of the Old Westcliffian Association is to hold an annual reunion dinner here at the school. And at the last dinner, which was last September, we had people from 10 decades going right back to the late 1930s who had been at the school.
If we want to start looking at the mysteries of the past, it's also important that we investigate the mysteries of the present. For years, I've been asked by pupils, is it true that there are secret tunnels under the school? Westcliff High School for Boys is soon to be a 100-year-old building, and for this reason we set about exploring some of the more original areas hidden behind the day-to-day classrooms. With the help of the caretaker, we looked inside some of the more secluded areas of the school building, such as the boiler room, seen here under the headmaster's office. Although much of the equipment in there is new, the brickwork and stripped away feel of the interior echoes the past. One of the first places we visited was the boiler room, the heart of the building. Whilst the equipment was less than 5 years old in here, the actual room had kept its role since the school was built, seen in the original plans. At the back of it, there's also a storage area. The brickwork hadn't seen any more than a lick of paint since it was built. The area under the hall was even more fascinating. Probably for maintenance, this large space directly under the wooden floor of the school hall was connected to a cupboard-like doorway inside a basement area for pipes near the school stage. The area was divided by these grid-like supports, visible in the original plan of the school building. We then investigated the east storage area under the eastmost corridor. This was simply used for storage, as was the western side. However, a door at the end of the western storage area revealed an area not been seen before, even by the caretaker. He was so excited he climbed straight in. It appears to be an area of the ground, hence the mud and manhole cover, which was part of the school's foundations, untouched since 1924. Next, we explored a tunnel in the east basement, which many pupils claim to be the so-called secret tunnels. Unfortunately, this was no more than a very modern area for electricals that went down only a short way. You can see on the right where the original brickwork meets the modern breeze blocks. The final secret area that we looked at was the attic, which runs under the slate roof of the building. We accessed it via the modern upstairs addition. Because it had been used so little, it looked almost new, even though it was in fact almost 100 years old. That concludes our tour of Westcliff High School for Boys, past and present, every day and unseen. We soon approach the school building centenary in only a decade's time, and just think how the pupils in another 100 years' time will be investigating the school as it is today, and by then, we will be ghosts of the past. If hidden local history fascinates you, then please take a look at beyondthepoint.co.uk, where you can contact us as well as see some of the other places we have explored. We hope this documentary has provided a comprehensive look at the school's history for the first time.